What happens when a farm bill dies? What will the next farm bill hold? Will we have a new farm bill? Those are the questions we're digging into in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of The Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field, then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. It's me, your host, Damian Mason. I got a great one for you today. I've got Roger Cryan. He is the chief economist for the American Farm Bureau Federation. He penned an article that came out on September 30th, the very last day of the existing Farm Bill, which was the extension of the Farm Bill from 2018 because it got rolled over for another year. And now we have none. I'm recording this the first week of October. By the time you listen to this, maybe you're listening to this in November, maybe we've got this all straightened out. I'm doubtful that we will, because I've seen this game before. Roger Cryan has also seen this game before. He's got a long history of being in ag. He's an upstate New York kid that attained his bachelor's degree at Johns Hopkins, and then went to Johns Hopkins, and then he got a advanced degree at University of Florida, so he's a Gator. But anyway, he's sitting here in his spare room in Washington, D.C., and he's talking to us about the Farm Bill. His article, What Happens When a Farm Bill Dies? Well, this one did, and it was on life support for a while. Now it's dead. Talk to me.
Well, it takes a little time to die. Things wind down, but there are some things that go away right away. Some of the international market development programs, like the Market Access Program and the Foreign Market Development Program, those stop as soon as the Farm Bill ends. The Food for Progress stops as soon as the Farm Bill ends. Some of the programs for new uses, the Bio-Based Markets Program and Bioenergy Program for advanced biofuels, those both stop. Some pretty important animal health programs stop at the end of the Farm Bill as of midnight on Monday.
Yeah, so we're recording this on October 4th, and then I'm going to be releasing this later in October. So the point is, some people might be listening to this, and I'd be like, oh, okay, this sounds like old news. Well, it's kind of old news, but it's really not. The likelihood, let's just go ahead and start at the beginning. For the person that works in agriculture, and I've got a lot of listeners, Roger, that they might be, probably 1/3 of my listeners are farmers, 2/3 are agricultural professionals that still have a tie to the farm, whatever. And we know about the Farm Bill, but many of us, we don't interact with it daily. Okay. The bulk of it, I think we should point out here, that most of us know in agriculture, it's 77% of the entire USDA's budget goes to nutrition programs, which means free lunch and free breakfast for school kids and SNAP and things like that. So let's just start big picture, what generally the Farm Bill is historically, and then we're going to talk about what happened when this one died, and then we're going to talk about what we think the next one should look like. All right. History of the Farm Bill.
Damian, the Farm Bill is a very big piece of legislation. It covers nutrition. That's about 80%, over 80% of the Farm Bill. That includes SNAP, or what we used to call food stamps. That's a big, big piece of it. That doesn't stop when the Farm Bill stops, because that's permanent law. It includes, the Farm Bill includes things like research funding for agriculture. It includes the crop insurance program. which is extremely important for farmers.
Okay, so listening right now, let's just go through that. So the Farm Bill, you saw sprawling legislation. Most of us kind of get that because I don't think there's any such thing as non-sprawling legislation that comes out of Washington, D.C. at this point in our lives. Farm Bill was invented. We got farm policy going clear back to FDR and the Agricultural Adjustment Act and these kinds of things. So when did we come up with the actual Farm Bill? Because it gets renewed every 5 years. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's the only category. I mean, they do spending bills and all that, but it's the only thing. Like, there's not new sets of rules and laws for steel manufacturing every 5 years. Ag is the one thing that every 5 years gets re-upped. Yes?
Yes, that's right. It's unusual. It's been like that for quite some time. In fact, it's been like that almost since the beginning, almost since the 1930s.
Yeah. So when I say the agricultural legislation does, in my view, and you're the expert, I'd say Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Agricultural Adjustment Act, and that was a lot to do with the Depression and trying to actually put some stabilization to prices, and actually we destroyed supply. Most people don't know that. The first farm policies really are about 90 years old, 1930s. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's a few things. There's a few things in the Farm Bill in current USDA farm policy that still look like the 1933 Agricultural Adjustment Act. Not many, but a few.
By the way, a neat little sidebar, because people tune in not just for the facts, but also sometimes for the entertaining stories. One of the Agricultural Adjustment Act's first tasks was to go out and destroy supply of crops. And you had people screaming like, we got folks standing on bread lines and you're getting rid of food. And it was because the prices were so bad, we decided to destroy supply to thereby increase prices. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. The first Farm Bill, the 1933 Act, was really about supply management and the government telling everybody when to farm and how much to farm and so forth. It was not a very democratic or free market bill.
No. And actually, you can also then say some of the future stuff, the conservation programs, taking supply off the table, harkens back to some of that very thing from the 1930s.
That was the shift in 37, 38. They implemented a new farm bill with a lot of conservation programs. The irony is that they did that as an excuse to take production off the shelf, like you said. But the good news is it led to an awful lot of work on soil conservation and conservation generally. I mean, the U.S. is so far ahead of the rest of the world in terms of conservation work, soil conservation, land conservation, and people don't really appreciate that. We've been doing it for a long time, and we really do it better than almost anybody in the world.
Yeah, well, you could argue that after the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, we certainly needed to. So the Farm Bill has its roots clear back to the 1930s. I don't know when it became an every 5 year thing. You can fill me in on that. When did it become an every 5 year thing? Because it's certainly in your career and mine, I know it's been a thing that it's contested. There's arguments about what should be in the next one and the new one and all that kind of stuff. I'd say that's the last 40 years.
It's been periodic. It's been periodic almost from the beginning. I think it first became a 5 year thing in 1980. I think before that they were trying to do 6 year farm bills for a while, but it's never been something where they set it and forget it. It's always been something where they say, okay, here's what it's going to be for the next X number of years, and we'll come back and deal with it later.
So the situation we're dealing with now is it was supposed to have been re-upped in 2023. Here it is, 2024. It's still not. So it got a 1 year extension, and now we're without a farm bill. But as you say, there's certain things that are permanent. And in your article, you talk about permanent law versus, and I don't know what the other one would be, but I guess temporary would be the other word. But crop insurance, critically important because of the amount of capital expenditure in production agriculture. If our guys and gals out here in production agriculture don't have the crop insurance, which is really a revenue insurance, if they don't have the revenue insurance, then it starts to almost threaten our food supply or our viability of the ag sector. So crop insurance is always funded, whether we have a revised farm bill or not, right?
Yeah, crop insurance is always authorized. It does not expire with the farm bill, and it has to keep going. There does have to be continued appropriations every year, just like other government programs. but the crop insurance keeps going. And the crop insurance program also, as it stands right now, has a lot of flexibility. Folks talk about how we don't have crop insurance for every crop. The permanent legislation, the permanent crop insurance legislation, provides a lot of flexibility for USDA to support and support the development and implementation of new products. It's a very flexible program. It's extremely important. Maybe it's gotten to be the most important piece in there for farmers, and we're grateful that continues even when the Farm Bill expires.
Okay, so conservation reserve payments. I have 14 acres or 16 acres of conservation land here on my different farms, and it's going to be funded no matter what, because I signed a contract. Hell, I mean, I guess if it weren't, I could go and sue the USDA and say, wait a minute, I signed a 15-year deal to put this buffer strip in or this windbreak in, and now you're defaulting. So then I have a cause for a lawsuit. So that's why it's permanent. Yes.
The program itself, the CRP program isn't permanent, but if you've got a contract already, that will carry through. There is no, if you've got a contract, you've got a contract. But as of September 30th at midnight, there'll be no new enrollments for CRP until there's a new Farm Bill.
Okay, because
some of the programs that were funded under the Inflation Reduction Act a couple of years ago, those can continue because that's been added on top of the Farm Bill. But the CRP is not one of the things that's authorized under Inflation Reduction Act money. So CRP and a few other conservation programs won't have any new enrollments until we get a new Farm Bill.
Yeah. So the existing ones, the contracts that are in place, like mine, continue to pay. The other ones are in limbo. Or new ones, if I want to submit a new one, it's not going to happen until there's a new Farm Bill. Okay, you brought up Inflation Reduction Act. Most people are saying, wait a minute, what the hell does that have to do with the Farm Bill? What's that have to do with the United States Department of Agriculture? What's that have to do with food production out here on the farms in America? Well, the Inflation Reduction Act, or as those of us that are more cynical call it, the Inflation Creation Act, was $1.7 trillion, if I'm not mistaken, Roger. And of that 1.7, 900 billion of it went to green initiatives. I think my numbers are right. You can correct me because you're the one that's sitting 5 miles from the White House. Where does that money come into agriculture? Because there is some, and it's not part of this Farm Bill. Talk to me.
One of the things that was in there was.
Are you really 5 miles from the White House?
I'm actually about a mile and a half from the White House.
You're sitting a mile and a half from the White House, and I just said that. And I call it the Inflation Creation Act. You, being political, didn't hop in on that and say, okay, that's funny. All right, you can tell me. It's an Inflation Creation Act, isn't it?
It certainly didn't do anything to reduce inflation. And we can spend a whole other hour if you want talking about how inflation is caused by the money supply and that Jay Powell didn't have to finance $6 trillion in government spending. He could have just held firm, but that's another story.
You and I can both agree on one thing, that inflation is caused by government creation of money. So I think and government spending. So we both agreed on that, and it's as simple as that. Inflation Creation Act, Inflation Reduction Act, as it's actually known, does throw money at agriculture, and it is not going to be paused by this Farm Bill. So tell us what things are, why that would be good for anybody in ag.
There were some conservation programs, existing conservation programs, that were given additional funding over the course of the following 10 years. And those that did not include CRP, and a couple other things. It included some grassland programs, CSP, and a few other things. Those will continue. So for the farmers that want to participate in those can continue. And that's good for those folks that want to do that. There are a couple other things that were in the IRA, where the 40B tax credit for sustainable aviation fuel that was supposed to help farmers deliver crops to folks making sustainable aviation fuel from biofuels.
Right.
And that didn't really work because the bill incorporated a UN model for climate measurements as a default, which was really skewed against U.S. crops. It was skewed in favor of Brazilian sugar and Brazilian corn and Chinese used cooking oil, a lot of which is coming in the country and isn't really used cooking oil. That's another story. And there's a 45Z credit that kicks in at the end of this year that replaces the blender's credit, which the blender's credit has been a very simple biofuels get a tax credit. The 45Z is going to set the same sort of measurement standard for greenhouse gas reduction. That was in the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's going to be questionable how much farmers can take advantage of that as well. So there's some work that needs to be done on that.
Now, this is a big one. This is a big one. And you threw a lot of stuff out there. So, and a lot of inside pool. And I know a little bit about it. My involvement with extreme ag, which is a completely other thing. I'm hearing about the 45Z and all these things. And this is a big deal. So I want to make sure that you go through a couple of those line items and explain why this matters, because this is about sustainability and then getting paid for programs and practices. All right, speaking of paid for practices, if you want to make money on your acres, and I know you do, you should really look into Truterra. Truterra is a sponsor of this show. You've heard me talk about them. They're a subsidiary of Land O'Lakes, been around for 100 years, Land O'Lakes has. So Truterra is focused on supporting farmers at every stage of the sustainability journey. If you want to figure out a way to make more money off of your land, and in times like this, you probably need to look at all the revenue sources you can. Why not look at a sustainability program through Truterra? What you're talking about is maybe you get paid for strip tilling, ridge tilling, reduced till, you cover crops, things like this that can help you improve your sustainability rating. And all of a sudden you get paid for it. Go to TruterraAg.com to learn more. Truterra, Truterra, TruterraAg.com to check it out. All right. So those things like 45Z and all that, we've been hearing, well, that's part of the tax code. Now you're saying, well, this ties into the farms bill. And we know that there's allegedly going to be these things where I can take low carbon or carbon intensity score and I can go to sell my corn at an ethanol plant, and allegedly I might get 10 cents more a bushel. Is that all part of this?
It's not part of the Farm Bill, but it was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And that was one of the things that was supposed to help farmers and hasn't really helped farmers. 40B corn was kind of closed out until the last few months, and then they opened the door for corn in ways that weren't really practical. Soybeans can qualify. Soybean oil can qualify up to a point, but the standards have really incentivized a lot of foreign feedstocks to come in. I know there's folks on the Hill now that are looking at restrictions on that to allow for domestic feedstocks, to extend that 45Z and allow for domestic feedstocks only. And that's a discussion that's out there, and that could go a long way to helping make sure the program benefits farmers. It's separate from the Farm Bill, but it connects with the IRA, with the Inflation Reduction Act.
Farm Bill stuff that also moves forward. Price supports. Hadn't been an issue as much in 21, 22, or 23 because we had record farm income, highest 3 years of farm income in the history of American agriculture. Price supports didn't seem to even be something we talked about. You can still go to the USDA office and there's a board up on the wall that says, here's our loan values and all those kind of things, because a lot of people don't realize USDA does loan backing and all this. This matters now in a low commodity environment more than it did. Am I right, Roger?
It matters a lot. It matters a heck of a lot more this year. The USDA came out with its net farm income numbers that showed that net farm income overall didn't go down that much, but the crop net farm income went down quite a bit. It's easy to disguise low crop prices when livestock prices stay up, because these field crops, they're an input for the livestock guys, so they're just more profitable when the crop guys take it in the neck. But their crop guys really are having a hard time. And you're right, in 2022, 2023, the folks on the Hill were saying, "Oh, what's the rush on a Farm Bill? Let's just extend it another year." But one of the pieces in the Farm Bill that does not update, that does not continue, is the Title I. It's the support programs. They are first of all, the ones in the old Farm Bill are out of date because the numbers have been eroded by that inflation that we were talking about. When you have 25% increases in the general price level, it really knocks the heck out of the reference prices that are built into the 2018 Farm Bill.
Wait, to clarify, 25% increase in the price. You're talking about inflation in general.
General inflation.
Yeah, the general basket of goods when I'm a consumer. Well,
Yep.
I'm afraid that some of my listeners may have inferred that you were saying 25% increase in prices at the farm level, which clearly
No.
it's the opposite. We've gone down 25% while everything we go and pay for,
Right.
fuel to food, is up 25%. So you're saying the reference point
Yeah.
of our thing goes back to 2018. One of your points in your article was that we're up at least 20%. The dollar is worth 20% less than it was
Yep.
6 years ago. And that's
Right.
being generous.
Which means all those reference prices are worth 20% less than they were.
When you get off of this call, why don't you walk down the street and start swinging your bat and tell these stupid bastards to stop spending so much money? Have you ever thought about that? You're in Washington, D.C. I'm not. I'm in Indiana. I mean, it's a long way for me to walk.
Yeah, I'm about a half a mile from the Capitol, but I don't think I'll get in.
I think everybody's asking the same question I am, Roger. Why don't you do something about it?
I don't think I'll get in the door with a baseball bat. Farm Bureau is doing a lot about it. Farm Bureau has been pushing this right from the start. We, if you go back and look at our market intel reports, you'll see our discussions about inflation and how the Federal Reserve Bank caused inflation, how the response to COVID was ineffective because it was a supply problem we had that was slowing down the economy, not a demand problem.
Not a demand problem, and then we just threw gas on the flames of demand by tossing money out there. Speaking of money, parity prices. That's one of the things you talk about in here. I've got a degree in agricultural economics. I'm a reader. I like history. I got to be honest with you. I've never really understood this whole thing about referencing parity prices. Give it to me in layman's terms.
Well, the old farm programs in the 30s and 40s into the 50s were based on parity prices. There was this idea in the 20s and 30s that the golden age of agriculture was 1910 to 1914. So they said, let's look at the prices from 1910 to 1914 and say that should be the basis for supporting farm prices, and we'll adjust that based on the prices of farmer inputs. They never adjusted those for yields or productivity generally, and so the result is that these support prices just keep these parity prices, if you measure it that way, just keep going up. And those are the prices that are used to set the support prices in permanent law, the so-called permanent law. So the commodity programs, the ARC PLC programs, those programs, the 2024 crop a year programs will continue through the 2024 crop years. Through the 2024 crop year, the 2025 crop year, if there's no new farm bill, will revert to permanent law. Will revert to the old-fashioned support programs. There'll be marketing loan programs where you can get paid based on the support price, based on the parity price under permanent law. The very first one of those that would kick in would be on January 1st. USDA would be authorized to buy dairy products at a level that would support milk at a $49 per hundredweight level, which is about twice what it is now.
Yeah, so I'm looking at that right here. It's a little more than double that. But the USDA doesn't buy milk. Dairy processors buy milk. So explain me this, how I want you to explain this, and then I want to go through pricing of other stuff and the corn and the soybeans and the wheat and all those things. When you got corn at $7.45, $15 for wheat, and I'm like, whoa. I want you to explain all that because the producer's not getting that. All right, before I do, I take another little commercial break for Redox. Redox has become a business partner of mine. I love those folks out of Burley, Idaho. 30-year-old company. They started in specialty crop, worked their way into turf, and now they said, you know what, Broadacre can use our Redox bionutrients. Sure. A Midwest corn or soybean grower, the evolution of agronomic strategy from Redox Bionutrients is a new way of thinking of getting more with less through ultra-efficient plant nutrition and superior biostimulants. Please check this out. They got products that combine flagship technology. Their flagship products are Mainstay SI, Banks, with breakthrough nitrogen optimization through their new RDXN technology. Find out more and get detailed information on how you can utilize their products at redoxgrows.com/Midwest, redoxgrows.com/Midwest. Check it out, redoxgrows.com/Midwest. USDA sets prices? No, the market sets prices on things like milk, and it's $2,300 a hundredweight right now. And you're saying that there's a $49 per hundredweight dairy program. Explain me that.
So if permanent law kicks in, if nothing's done about the Farm Bill by January 1st, USDA is authorized. They're actually directed to support milk at $49 a hundredweight, and that was done by buying dairy products. So that would mean buying cheddar cheese at about $5 a hundredweight. Would mean buying butter and powder at prices that would support $49 a hundredweight.
Not $5 per hundredweight on cheese. You say $5 a pound on that, right?
$5 a pound. Yeah, $5 a pound for cheese.
We should put it at 40. So that means that if there's no farm bill by January 1 of 2025, that the USDA is not just authorized, they're required to then make milk $49 a gallon. It'd be great for the guy that rents my farm ground. He'd love to sell $49 milk.
Well, the processors would probably be the first ones to benefit from that because they'd be able to produce the product. In theory, over time, you could raise the price, but we export a lot of milk, and that would really just undercut our exports. It would be some short-term benefit. If this was permanent law, it would make farm programs insanely expensive.
Yeah.
If it was just temporary, it would just be very disruptive to markets, and there'd be some uneven benefits to some folks. So it's a kind of good news, bad news scenario on something like this. And that's just direct purchases. Milk and honey would be direct purchases at very high prices. If we continue to not have a farm bill, a new farm bill, the permanent law would lead to marketing loans with non-recourse marketing loans where you get the loan at a rate of about $7.45 per bushel for corn, for example, and then forfeit your crop to the government. So the government would effectively be buying corn for $7.45 a bushel. It'd be wheat $15 a bushel, and
So by the way, how's that? In theory, that's what is supposed to happen by law. It's not going to happen because the real price of corn is $4, and then the government's support price is $7.45. That means the government's floating a check for $3.45 a bushel to every farmer for every bushel of corn they produce.
Except they'd be taking ownership of the crop unless they turned around and sold it right away. They'd be taking ownership of the crop. They could be taking stuff off the market with the dairy stuff and stuff off the market. It'd be disruptive.
Well, yeah,
but then there would be no program. There'd be no program for soybeans, for example, because soybeans was not supported back in the 50s. So there's no provision for that in permanent law.
So it's not really going to happen anyway, though, right?
The odds are it won't happen. Even the dairy program in 2013, when the Farm Bill expired, the extension expired, and it took until February of 2014 to get the new Farm Bill. USDA slow walked the rulemaking on buying dairy products. They don't have to do that. They could. They have plenty of notice. They could be ready to buy on January 2nd if they chose to. It would send a signal. But my guess is they'll slow walk that again. But at some point, if there's no new Farm Bill or no extension, something's gonna have to happen.
Understood. So your prediction, what's going to happen? We've got, first off, the CCC, that's a point of your article, the Commodity Credit Corporation. That's a tie into agriculture as well, and that's a pool of money.
Yep.
That essentially the Secretary of Agriculture can deploy at will. We did this when there was wasn't that part of the tariff relief thing about 5-6 years ago when the government decided farmers were below break even, and they said it's because of the tariffs. And I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. I think it's because the world was glutted with commodities, kind of like it is right now. And we tossed money. $51 billion got tossed at American agriculture one of those years. Much of it came from the Commodity Credit Corporation. I remember that.
Yeah,
terrifying.
President Trump used a lot of money to help farmers based on their market losses after the trade war with China began. President Vilsack has used a lot of CCC money for his partnership for climate smart commodities. It's been a very versatile tool for secretaries of agriculture to use however they see fit. The secretary announced this week a funding for food, U.S. food to be delivered for disaster assistance and some other things. He has a tendency to use that for sort of targeting assistance. He also has been arguing, the Secretary Vilsack has been arguing during the Farm Bill debate that we don't need more money in the Farm Bill, just trust the Secretary of Agriculture to do this CCC. And we're sort of saying now, well, you have an opportunity to show us what you can do with it in the absence of a Farm Bill and in a year where crop prices have really hit the skids and row crop farmers are really having a. Why don't you show us how effective the CCC can be in providing that assistance?
Well, and what are we going to see? What's your prediction? Is the CCC going to toss out money and give money to farmers this year? I predict that it will.
They already have begun. The question is, who are they going to give money to? Is it going to be broad assistance to our crop farmers for the very poor margins they're facing, or is it going to be targeted at the folks he likes to target? And
well, who's he like to target?
He likes to target. He likes to target all kinds of folks, but not necessarily.
Anybody that can put the words climate smart agriculture into anything they're doing is in favor with this USDA. I'm sorry, with this administration. It seems to me. I don't think that Vilsack can stand on a stage and you speak one paragraph without saying the words climate smart agriculture.
I mean, he's advocated over and over again. Part of his standard speech is to talk about how sustainable aviation fuel is going to be the savior for our corn and soybean farmers. And yet, when the IRS implemented the guidance for the sustainable aviation fuel tax credit, it was almost useless.
Yeah, it favored Brazil. To your point, it favored Brazil more than us because of the standards.
The chief economist's office at USDA is working very hard to try to get these standards right. But a lot of the other folks involved aren't really that interested. So we'll see how effectively Secretary Vilsack can help push more effective guidelines for clean fuels. He really, I think, believes in it, but we've got to see it actually implemented. And I think he will. I think ultimately he will do the right thing, and he will provide help for our row crop farmers generally, based on the poor year and the sort of outdated, how outdated our current reference price program is. The PLC is out of date.
So moving forward, are we going to get what's going to happen? Are we going to get a new farm bill? When and what will be the big changes to it?
Yeah, I can't really imagine. I cannot imagine that the Congress will allow all these programs to kick in in permanent law. That was the whole point. When they every 5 years they do a new farm bill, or 6 years or 7 years, they do a new farm bill, and they leave this permanent law as the background to basically convince their future selves to do it again, to get the farm bill done. And so I think something will happen. But the question is it going to be another extension, or is it going to be a new farm bill? Because if it's a new farm bill, then it can be updated. We can increase the reference prices that are now so badly out of date. We can make some of the updates, even some of the improvements on the SNAP program and some of the other things that we'd like to see. Ideally, we'd see more money for agricultural research, because there's nothing that has a bigger impact on the sustainability of agriculture, economic, environmental, social, than research to improve productivity. Increasing agricultural productivity based on public and private research has a greater impact on sustainability than anything anybody does on these sustainability programs. So we would like to see a new farm bill. There is some movement. There's the four corners of the four ag committees. The Democrats and Republicans in both ag committees have expressed a desire to do something this year. It's going to be a heavy lift to get it done between now and the end of the year, but it's a possibility, and we're looking forward to that. If they can't do it, then I have no doubt they'll do some sort of extension, but they may not. They may wait until they might not do an extension this year, like I said, in 2013, the Farm Bill expired, and they didn't do an extension until the following spring. But that was not a new Congress; that was the same Congress. So we'll see what happens. But we're certainly still pushing hard for a new Farm Bill.
And you think it can happen between now and the end of this year?
If they're motivated, it can happen. I mean, things like that can happen.
Okay. And so if it doesn't happen and it goes to January 1st, a lot of crazy shit hits. And that's what I mean, we're talking about. A lot of stuff gets crazy after January 1st.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the dairy cliff, the so-called dairy cliff hits, and they're supposed to start buying
supporting double price milk. So that's not likely. So you think that then more likely is they figure out a way to extend between now and January 1st and say extend to another 6 to 12 months.
Well, if they do an extension, it'll be at least through the next fiscal year,
which is September 30th of 25.
Yeah, and I can't. There's been some folks talking about a 2-year extension. I don't see that happening. And honestly, the 2018 Farm Bill is just worn out. It's not good enough anymore. Yeah. It looked good in 2018, but thanks to Jay Powell, it doesn't. Title I, the support programs, ARC PLC don't really do anything for anybody.
Yeah. And not to mention, like you said, the cost of money. We've inflated at least to 20 to 30% since then. So there's a lot of the numbers that don't even make sense from 2018. I mean, it's as bad as going back to 1910 to 1914. Some of your references from the original farm bills.
And I think another thing that's worth thinking about is how this year's disastrous crop price might shake loose some of that money for the long term, to recognize that the support programs just are completely out of date. ARC PLC, the reference prices for ARC PLC are just no good anymore. And maybe we'll shake loose the idea that sometimes you have to put a little more money into the baseline. This is the first Farm Bill where Farm Bureau has ever asked for more money for the baseline for the Farm Bill. And it's because some of these programs, particularly the ARC PLC programs, are inadequate at the current levels.
I think we're going to leave it there. What's your optimism say? We're going to get something done? No. We're going to get an extension. Yes?
I'd say there's a real possibility this year. I think you'll be amazed at what happens in Washington when folks are motivated, and when the four corners have all said, "Yeah, we want to make it happen." Okay. One of the things that's really missing, if we don't have a new Farm Bill, is the opportunity to put a lot of that IRA money, that IRA conservation money, into the baseline, so that those things can continue indefinitely, so that extra conservation money can continue into the next Farm Bill and the Farm Bill after that. Because
and by the way, if that happens, that's also part of that whole sustainable aviation fuel and Inflation Creation Act fueling green energy policy. And you'd think that they could, that seems to be their initiative. Why can't they make that work? That's where you're going.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in the election, and we'll see how motivated the folks that come back are about who's going to come back after January 1st. We'll see. The election will kind of define what happens in the lame duck, whether folks want to get something done now or whether they want to kick it down the road.
Stay tuned. His name is Roger Cryan. He's the chief economist with the American Farm Bureau Federation. He's my guest on here. Hopefully he'll come back and talk about this maybe in 2025. What happens when a farm bill dies? Will we get a new farm bill? Those are the questions we ask. Well, we're still kind of asking them. Anyway, thanks for being here, Mr. Professor Cryan. Dr. Cryan. Thanks for being here. Till next time, I'm Damian Mason, and this is The Business of Agriculture. Hey, thanks for being here. This episode of The Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You've heard me talk about Pattern Ag because I think it's a pretty cool concept. New technology that allows you to predict the problems you're going to have and therefore treat them before those problems cost you money. What kind of problems am I talking about? Pests and disease. Things like cordon rootworm, sudden death syndrome, cyst nematode, and a whole bunch of other bad things that happen out there in the field that can cost you money. Guess what? Pattern Ag will let you find out ahead of time if the disease or the pest pressure is there, and therefore you're treating it before it costs you any money. What a great concept. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to learn more about their product, their technology, how it can make you money, save you yield, and also where you can find a rep that can come out there and do the work for you. Pattern.ag.